What's up, guys? It's your boy Barca Boy 103, and welcome to another reaction video where today we're gonna be reacting to Football Made Simple's video on Hansi Flick's tactics, how they were at Bayern Munich, how he implemented them differently or the exact same at Barcelona, and also what to expect for the new season ahead. Before we get into it, of course, make sure you guys drop a like down below and subscribe down below as well if you haven't already, and of course the original link to the video is in the description below, and let's get right into it.
This is Flick's Bayern in possession. A high left back allowing a tucked in winger, a pivot joining the attack, and plenty of men between the lines. And what do you see when we compare it to his Barcelona side in the attack? A high left back, inverted winger, men between the lines. Near carbon copies. But this is his Barca side in the press. Narrow wingers with a withdrawn centre forward. Compared to a 4-4-2 press with Bayern, completely different. Watching Hansi Flick's Barcelona has been one of the most confusing experiences. Are you watching a Flick side with Barcelona's fingerprints all over it, or are you watching a Barcelona side with Flick's fingerprints all over it? The truth lies somewhere in between, a testament to a manager who possesses both the unwavering conviction to maintain his tactical identity from FCB to FCB, while having the humility to adapt his approach to the talent at his disposal, rather than forcing square pegs into round holes. In this video, you and I will examine the tactical differences and similarities between Flick's sides. The first striking example of a similarity but yet a stark difference is what Flick had to do with his man management. At Bayern Munich, Flick inherited a dressing room in disarray. Niko Kovac had alienated the club's elder statesman, leading to a dressing room filled with discontentment. But rather than sweeping away the old guard, he embraced them. As soon as Flick came in, he got to work, reinstating Neuer, Boateng and Müller to prominent roles, creating a happy dressing room almost overnight. At Barcelona, Flick walked into the opposite situation. Rather than a squad full of disgruntled veterans, he found a team brimming with young talent that needed guidance.
To be fair, he did get rid of some of the big veteran players as well. Did not approve the renewal of Sergio Roberto, now trying to push Ter Stegen out as well. So he got rid of some of the big heads as well. If you compare him Bayern Munich, embracing those Club de Amigos kind of type S kind of players, and this time here he's kind of pushing them out.
While at he had shown glimpses of his ability to develop youth, transforming Alphonso Davies from a sporadic winger into one of Europe's elite left-backs, at Barcelona, nurturing young La Masia talents became his key focus. And immediately he took them under his wing, with plenty of young talents finding themselves being key players in the starting 11. Flick was already beginning to show he had no problems adapting. And he laid them out like this, as Flick did not hesitate in helping Barcelona move away from their trademark 4-3-3 towards his preferred 4-2-3-1. Again, this wasn't some revolution, but more of an evolution. The new shape allowed Barcelona to flex back into a 4-3-3 when matches demanded, while providing Flick the structure he needed to fulfill his vision. This vision begins with the build-up phase, where Flick's fingerprints become unmistakable across both sides. By virtue of both being dominant in their leagues, they had high possession both in the Bundesliga and La Liga. But here we already begin to see Flick's fingerprints as well as his evolution. Two principles that define Flick's approach to possession are creating overloads in dangerous areas and ruthless verticality. To achieve this, Flick employs a counterintuitive strategy, minimizing the number of players in deep positions to maximize the bodies higher up the pitch. This creates overloads as high up the pitch as possible, which is what he craves, and offers multiple vertical passing lanes to break the opposition lines. That
kind of pattern right there, if you watch even any games from last season, it's so obvious. You see the right hand side of Koundé, Lamy, and whoever that right side midfielder is, for example, Frankie de Jong. Left hand side is going to be Rafa, even though he's going to be tucked inside a bit more with Balde and Pedri. And 9 times out of 10, it is Kubarsi and Inigo, especially when we face those lower oppositions deep alone, helping with build-up play. And that's why also he didn't really have to rely on Ter Stegen too much in that build-up play, because 9 out of 10, the goalkeeper, whether it be Szczesny and Naki, would always pass it short the majority of the time to those center backs. And that's why Arojo as well as passing was limited, because Flick knew that his verticals were not that great, and that's why he kind of, hold him down onto just making those simple passes into space first, and then the verticals will come from other players.
manifested across both sides was often in allowing the fullbacks the license to move higher up the pitch initially. But more importantly, the beating heart of these systems lay in his use of the double pivot. Whenever possible, he wants to use a 2-1 orientation in the build-up to allow one of the pivots to push higher up the pitch. In his first Bayern season, the Thiago-Kimmich partnership was perfect for Flick. Two technically gifted midfielders who could effortlessly switch positions. Either could drop deeper whilst the other pushed forward, creating a fluid progression pattern that opponents struggled to deal with.
I'll see if he mentions Frankie and Pedri. Pedri, I want to talk about that.
Sound familiar? At Barcelona, this manifested through Pedri and Casado for most of the season. While Casado typically...
I think this is why the Pedri-Frankie double pivot works much more than Pedri and Casado, because Casado can do that deeper role, but when you rely on him more advanced, on his individuality, his creativity, his being able to cut the lanes through passes. That's why Frankie de Jong is so superior to Casado in this position, due to the fact that it's going to be a lot of back and forth in between what you're going to be doing. There's going to be a lot of running forward to occupy the space and exploit the space as well. And that's why Frankie de Jong really took that starting spot from Casado.
Operated as the deeper midfielder, their ability to rotate positions became a powerful weapon against teams attempting to man-mark the deepest pivot.
Not too much though. I think with Frankie it was much more fluid.
It was the Kimmich-Goretzka double pivot, where the dynamics of the build-up began to change. And in fact, it led to a big difference with what he's achieved with his Barcelona side. But we'll touch on that briefly. Flick's DNA extends beyond just the pivots. Here's the thing. Unlike most managers, Flick does not want to be completely dependent on a single source, a metronome for all of his progression. He wants it to start from the back whenever possible. But this isn't a random preference. It's the cornerstone to making sure his systems work. By placing progression responsibility on his centre-backs, he frees his midfielders to operate in more advanced positions, to allow those overloads higher up and allow verticality. At Bayern Munich, it was Jerome Boateng, comfortable with the ball at his feet and a hell of a long passer, able to switch the play at will. He was joined by, in my view, one of the finest all-round players of his generation, David Alaba, who could do whatever Flick asked of him, whether it was carrying the ball up the field, switching the play, or piercing through the midfield to find men in higher lines. In many ways, it's not too different from what he's achieved with Barcelona, and it's one of the reasons he's leaned so heavily on young Pau Kubasi, who has an incredible ability to pierce the lines, giving Pedri the freedom to not always have to drop into the line to begin the build-up. And that's before even mentioning Inigo Martinez, who's no slouch with the ball at his feet either. Perhaps the biggest fundamental change has been Flick's transformation of Barcelona's build-up patterns. The Blaugrana have embraced a more direct, vertical progression, including long balls to Lewandowski, a significant departure from their tiki-taka approach. But here's one of the key differences between Flick's
play so crucial.
What happened when these sides were up against high-pressing oppositions who forced them to have a third man deep in order to create a minimal overload? At Barcelona, as much as possible, Flick wanted to avoid having his pivots drop into the final line because, again, he wanted to have those numbers high for
I don't know, I see Frankie there a lot.
So it tended to be Jules Koundé instead, a centre-back by trade, being the first option to tuck in so that those pivots could stay higher up.
I guess, yeah.
Of course, when this wasn't possible, a pivot would drop in, but this is very much option 1 when Barcelona need to create a back 3. In Bavaria, things were very much reversed. Both Kimmich and Thiago were more than happy to drop into the back line, creating that also important 3 versus 2 to get the side up the pitch, while tucking in Pavard was only their secondary option. The beautiful contrast and similarity between the two FCBs continues higher up the pitch. Remember that Kimmich-Goretzka double pivot in his second season? It's one of the best examples of adapting to his players, as it was no longer Thiago alongside the German. Rather than forcing Goretzka to do his best Thiago impression, he embraced their differences, using Kimmich as the metronomic controller who could still deliver penetrative passing when required, and Goretzka as the dynamic box-to-box crasher whose vertical movements created havoc between the opposition lines. He was very much fulfilling the key Flick objective of causing overloads higher up the pitch, but he did so much more than just be a number higher up, as we'll see in a second.
And now we do that with Pedri, obviously.
But would it have made sense to try and convert Pedri to play a similar role, breaking into the box and trying to finish? Of course not. Why take away from one of the world's finest midfielders to shoehorn them into a philosophy?
Still make those deep
So
runs
while
though.
Pedri is still expected to push up like
There you
Goretzka,
go.
he's rarely breaking into the box as a late finisher.
That is
Instead,
true, that is
he
true.
operates off the left or still more centrally, and still looking to create, but just from higher up the pitch.
That's why you have
And when
that 10.
that's not possible, he can still function as a more genuine pivot who's more aggressive than ever in trying to progress the ball.
That's a lot of his goals came from outside the
Flick
box as well for
understands
Pedri.
that true adaptability isn't changing your principles, it's changing how you express them. But the biggest change to Barcelona's typical shape has been the introduction of a true number 10. One of these three depending on availability. This departure from the 4-3-3 has come because Barcelona still have enough technicians deep, so holding onto the ball there isn't a problem. In fact, their possession has actually increased from the Xavi era. But the 10 has been a big factor in increasing their verticality. A 10 means that a man is almost always seeking space between the lines, looking to be an option to receive. And while the 10 can drift deep to assist in possession, due to all three being capable of operating deeper, most of the times they are expected to either drift into the right-hand half space, or just stay higher up but central. Again, they prioritize whatever gives them the most options for verticality, because Flick understands that the most dangerous passes aren't horizontal connections, they're vertical disruptions. The likes of Olmo constantly investigate the space between the lines, which brings us onto Mr. Raumdeuter himself, Thomas Müller, and the striking resemblances between the two systems. Müller, of course, could also drift deep, as well as out to the right-hand side to cause overloads, much like the Barcelona 10s are expected to do. But one of his key performance areas was making vertical runs. The 10s in both systems are expected to make runs beyond their focal point, Lewandowski, and get into goal-scoring positions. This often involves bouncing the ball into the pole, who is still excellent at linking up play, often playing it through to the runner going beyond.
But enough the striker both
And
times.
even higher
His
up the
Lewandowski.
pitch, the similarities, particularly between his last Bayern side and his current side, become even more striking. In both, he used lopsided fullbacks, with the left backs being hyper-aggressive, while the right backs, who can both operate at
Tucking
centre-back,
inside.
were a little more conservative. This plays straight into Flick's wider strategy, as it allowed the left back to bomb high up the pitch. Gnabry, when he was on the left wing, took this opportunity to tuck in, as did Rafinha in the same exact situation, with Balde outside of him. The result? In both cases, they potentially had three men to receive vertical passes between the lines, and much like the number 10s, the tucked-in wingers had the responsibility to break beyond the forward. This was nothing new for Gnabry, but for Rafinha, this tucked-in inside position, running in behind,
Demon
was a new
time.
dimension that he added seamlessly to his game.
Yeah, that Ballon d'Or's campaign, his first time doing it.
And that brings us onto the right-hand side, where the winger wasn't expected to consistently attack the centre. Both Sane and Yamal were the beacons for
Touchline.
isolations in both sides whenever the play began on the left, before switching over for a 1v1. The roles of the wingers were clear. Down the left, tuck in and play in and around the centre forward. But down the right, spend more of your time with the ball at your feet and take on your man to get into crossing and shooting positions. And while in both instances the right backs were natural centre backs, that didn't mean they strictly had to invert and only worry about security. In fact, in both cases, when it was possible to create overloads, Flick expected his right backs to arrive late and offer their wingers support. The end product
so just
reveals
when
another
that-
subtle but crucial adaptation. At Bayern,
That's why Jules Koundé had over double figures in G8.
and with physically imposing players like Goretzka, Müller, and Gnabry joining Lewandowski in the box, aerial crosses from wide regions became a primary weapon.
We don't
At
have the hype for
Barcelona,
that.
with a smaller supporting cast, the focus shifted to cutbacks from the byline,
Exactly.
the same destination but a different route.
A quite obvious route.
A small but crucial detail. On the surface, the defensive approaches look wildly different. At Bayern Munich, Müller would push up alongside Lewandowski to form a loose 4-4-2. They could be hyper-aggressive with both forwards pressing the centre-backs, and this would naturally mean that the only short outlet was to the full-backs, who would then be aggressively pressed by the wingers. Alternatively, if rather than trying to press aggressively out wide, they were trying to protect the center, they switched to a piston press instead. One man always picking up the deepest pivot, whilst the other pressed the center backs. This looks in stark contrast to his Barcelona pressing shape, which has been oddly aggressive in a different way. Now, Flick expects Lewandowski, rather than pressing the center back, to pick up the deepest pivot instead, with the wingers expected to move from out to in to press the center backs, and ensure that the center is completely protected. This forces the opponent to play wide, where the fullbacks have to press unusually high to back up the shape. Completely different from his Bayern Munich spell. Or is it? Take a look at this phase. What do you notice? Exactly. The wingers are on the center backs with Lewandowski deeper, and the fullbacks are having to press higher up the pitch. It's clear that as his Bayern spell progressed, Flick was developing the pressing structure that has become the cornerstone of his Barcelona side. Another through line between the sides is that ridiculously high line. And well, in both sides, it led to a whole lot of this. It's fair to say that Flick's attacks have been impeccable, and while he did have a fairly solid defense in his first Bayern season, for the most part, his Barcelona and his Bayern sides have looked shaky when the opposition runs in behind. Hansi Flick's 2 FCBs represent the closest thing to managerial perfection, not in the sense of man management, personnel, or even his tactical plan. Instead, it's a perfect example of the strength of conviction to stick to your tactical philosophy, but also having the humility to tweak it to work with the players that you have, not the ones that you wish you had. And don't forget to check out.
It's very interesting, like you mentioned, that the philosophies and styles are the same, but he adapts it based on time. Very, very good insight. I think the most important thing to note is, of course, the last point he mentioned on the high line, which we know that now teams are adapting to. They're now used to it a bit more, and they also know how to beat it. Again, it's just about really execution. Doing it is what's hard, but the blueprint to beat it is very simple to get that high line press. But we know that Flick said to us a lot during this tail end of last season that he knows the holes, he knows the issues in the defensive line, and he will fix it during preseason. So hopefully the defense can concede less goals. I'm hoping for at least under 50. I know right now he said 70 plus in the video. I don't think we broke 100, but I think we're probably at like 80 something goals conceded last season. Again, a lot of them didn't really matter, of course, and a lot of them came with the risk of play, us getting used to the system and style in the beginning half of the season. But I think that number needs to be reduced quite significantly to not, put us in dangerous and bad situations. But of course, in the comments down below, let me know your thoughts on Flick's tactics going into next season. Are there any other tinkers or tweaks that you think needs to be done in order for us to have much more success than we did in our previous season? Drop a like if you did enjoy, and of course, subscribe down below if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next time on the channel. Take care, and Forza Barca.
Yeah.